Welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the Hidizs MM2 or the Mermaid 2, or it's the Mermaid MM2. I'm not exactly sure what the entire product name is, but the box says MM2, the listing says Mermaid, so it's somewhere in between the two. So first I do want to thank Hidizs for sending this review sample to me. Many thanks for sending this one off to me, and it's a very nice set. As you can see, it's about $79 on their site, and the build quality is kind of top-notch. And I went through a lot of this with the unboxing, and you can kind of see that you get this metal faceplate, and it has a removable filter that sort of looks like this. And if you pull it out, it looks like a screw with a dynamic driver damper right in the bottom of it. So, cool system for adjustable tuning. Have no issues. They actually work. They're not very slight variations. They're actually quite drastic changes because you are in fact changing the damper on the back of the dynamic driver. So that is what that does. The cable as well, very high quality. It's got this copper, silver, probably copper SPC mix, twisted with a very nice split and chin slider. No issues with this. This is 3.5 millimeters, and you do get the blue dot and the red dot to figure out which one is which. And this one is a recessed 2-pin. So if you look on the actual shell, you can see how that 2-pin adapter has got this flat top to it, and that actually fits quite nicely against the flat of this 2-pin adapter. So quite nice build. No complaints there. Packaging. Tips, these are the other filters that come with the MM2, so you get the treble set and the bass tip. And I think like most of these sets, you tend to stick with the middle. You're going to tend to stick with the balance, and that's exactly what I did as well. So that won't be too surprising if you try them to get a feel for them and then switch back to balanced, which is what I think most normal people are going to do. You also get this nice leather-ish case. It says Hidizs on it, and 2 packs of tips, which are, I think, differentiated by just the actual bore on those. Those are the thinner ones, and these are probably the wider ones. So quite wide bore set on those. So let's actually jump into it. So this is the Hidizs Mermaid MM2. It is a combo hybrid, 1 dynamic driver, 1 magnetostat. You can't really see. You can sort of see the magnetostat. It's kind of welded to the bottom dynamic driver, so you can kind of see it, but not really. It's a 6mm magnetostat, and I think with a 10mm dynamic driver. So nice hybrid setup configuration, very similar to the KZ ZES, if you guys are familiar with that one. It is the same dynamic driver magnetostat combination, both tacked together like that. So let's kind of jump right into it and talk about decision points, because like I said, this one is about $79. That is a very crowded space. It's got your Tin Hi-Fi T3 Pluses, your Arias, your Titan S's. So, especially recently, there's been quite a few sets that come out about the same price point. So at some point, you do have to decide among those which one is going to be your preference. And I think most of it is pretty much right here when we look at, and I will call it the Venus of balance. It has a pretty steep V shape. So the MM2 is this blue line, so you can see it basically has this is Titan S with this minimal lean base. This is T3 Plus, and it kind of splits the middle between the MM2 and Titan. So T3 Plus definitely gives you a little more meat compared to Titan, and the MM2 is certainly a bassier, more fun set than both of those. So if that's something that turns you on, then MM2 is probably going to be in your priority list according to that. And then when you look at the lower treble side, again, it's got this big V shape. So this lower treble, little plateau here, is really set up to balance against this. So lots of bass, lots of lower treble, typical V shape. That's exactly what I did. It's a very fun, energetic sound, a lot of fun. So I think where Titan S has this lean, shape to it and lean sound to it. That's a more technical set. T3 Plus tries to sort of balance this fun with some technicalities, and then I think Hidizs would be your most fun set out of the three. And we'll kind of get to what happens at the upper end, because that's a little different between the sets. As you can see, the MM2 actually drops off a little early, and that I think is not one of my favorite things to do. So, decision points. So the Venus, like I said, take a really close look at your own preferences. How much fun do you want? How much technicals do you want? You know, T3 kind of splits the middle. MM2 is definitely on that bassier fun side, which is, I have no problems with that. I love a good fun set. So the second part, and this is sort of a interesting one for me. So I call this one easy to drive, but hard to sound great. And that really gets to the heart of what your source is with this particular set. So along with this set, Hidizs actually sent along their S3 Pro dongle. And this happens to be a lower power dongle compared to their S9, but it's a very, very nice dongle, just a little low on the power side. And I don't really think it was a great match to this one. I think the MM2 requires just a little bit more power, just a little bit more maybe resolution and detail than what you get out of this one. So I wasn't so keen on pairing this with a lower power dongle, and it's kind of the same problem on the CX Pro. You know, it makes this set sound kind of average, kind of mediocre, and so let's say you are a typical budget guy, you've got a dongle, you've got some $30 sets, and you're really considering whether you should upgrade to a $70 or $80 set like the MM2, and I would say focus, on this first. Get these upgraded to where these need to be for a set like this, because I think you're just going to be a little disappointed spending twice as much money for the MM2 with a source that isn't quite up to the task of making this sound good. So yeah, I was sort of disappointed with this particular dongle, with this particular set. It just doesn't sound like $80 to me using these two. Certainly if you have better equipment, MM2 certainly scales much better with those. So I would just caution you and say that if you're really thinking about MM2 or jumping up from a $30 set to a $70 set or an $80 set, do think about your source and upgrading that before you take that leap. Because this one, in order for it to sound really great, you do need this weird balance of warmth. You need a dongle that's a little bit warm, has a lot of resolution, and the tips sort of make a little less of a difference, but I just wasn't too happy with the lower powered dongles on this one. So the tuning filters, very neat, and so here they are again. So very neat concept, but like I said, you are probably going to stick with the balanced one, or pick the treble one and use a nozzle damper. So you can actually put a tiny damper, and I talked about this in some post. You can put a tiny damper on this, and that will actually cut your lower treble, plus give you a little more bass from the treble. So the treble tuning actually cuts the bass a little bit. You'll get a little bit back by putting a damper on the nozzle, and that was kind of a combination I used for a couple days. It's not too bad. I ended up just going back to the balance just for the sake of reviewing it. So what does it sound like? It's got this fun, musical, energetic V-shape, lots of bass impact. Dynamic driver, lots of bass. It hits pretty hard. It's actually quite nice. It's just tuned for fun. It's got this fun musical sound to it as opposed to a tight, fast, something that's very clean. So lots of bass impact, lots of lower treble. It is a very likable, bassy sound. It's just not very clean, like I said. It's got quite a bit of bleed. It's got this big bump right here, lots of impact, and it carries over a lot of the energy into your mids. So again, if you're looking for something a little cleaner, that's not so much the MM2. This one is very much your fun, bassy set. So speaking of bass, it's definitely a bit too much. That's just my opinion of it, just a bit too much. But it does provide that counterbalance to that lower treble, like I said. you sort of need this. If you're going to bump this that high, you almost need this to make the whole thing listenable and likable. And that's exactly what they did. So I can't really fault them for doing that. But that's what it is. And it's definitely more fun, impactful than tight and fast. If you're looking for lots of texture, lots of tight, fast bass, that's not this guy. It's definitely a fun, slower style. And like I said, it does get quite a bit tighter with better sources. Definitely more power, better sources. All that cleans up quite nicely. But definitely for those who prefer more quantity over quality, it's just not too boomy and not too uncontrolled, especially if you have some power to it. And that's why I kind of keep harping on the power and the dongles. And especially at lower power dongles, it does sound a little bit more slow, sluggish. A little more boomy, so I was sort of happier when you give that one a little bit more power. So the mids, as you would expect, they're sandwiched between lots of bass and a big lower treble. So they are going to be recessed a little bit, especially if you're a low volume listener. So I definitely turned this one up quite a bit to keep the vocals forward. And, with the gain is pretty steep here. So as long as you're not in a weird trough here, the male vocals maybe a little bit, more recessed than female vocals, but that didn't necessarily bother me too much on this set. Just turn it up, and they tend to move forward quite a bit. It does sound a little bit warm, but it still has a bit edge to it because of that strong pinna gain. It's kind of an interesting set. You would expect this to have a very warm sound, but what they did here, having this plateau right here, it does give you that edge and that sharpness, that resolution and detail, and it kind of just slides right into kind of the right spot. It's got this very balanced and it's more balanced and natural than the graph looks. I was really expecting this guy to have this kind of awful thin vocals that were kind of dragged up a little too high, and it really doesn't do that because you've had this big glide in here on the bass side. So these two do work together, but I think at the end of the day they are sort of fun full mids. They're probably a little bit too fun, a little bit too full, and the lower treble is really providing a lot of bit of that clarity. But sort of the natural resolution and detail is sort of on the edge of this price tag at $80. I think people have an expectation of a lot of resolution, a lot of detail, and the way they set up this tuning, it doesn't necessarily emphasize that. So I think it's kind of right on the edge. That's how I would call it. And again, that's why I keep poking at the dongles, is the lower power dongles didn't seem to really provide the resolution that I would expect at $80. And I'll kind of keep on harping on that. It sounds really good if you have more expensive equipment, but on the budget side of dongles, I think I would probably address my source, because you're going to be right on the edge of what you feel is appropriate resolution of that price tag. So the treble, it's really lower treble heavy, like I said, that big plateau, and it's got this really early roll off that really holds this back from sounding a lot more expensive. So you got this big lower treble bump here. There's some 8K energy right here, which is actually there. That's not just the coupler, but it tends to fall off pretty early right there. And that just gives you this sort of a flat sounding treble if you're a big air guy, or you're looking for a lot of that maybe sizzle and sparkle. A lot of those higher end sets address treble in that way by doing a nice extension, the way these two sets extend straight out like that, and this one falls down. So you are going to be missing some of that very high treble energy. And I think, like I said, that's just the little bit that keeps this one from sounding beyond its price bracket. It essentially falls into its natural price by not really extending treble as far as it should. So, kind of a nitpick there, but it is what it is. They should have put some more extension on it. So the 8K, like I said, does have some energy that will actually bother some people. It bothered me, again, on a dongle, on a lower powered source, on a source that's a little bit sharper. That 8K definitely shows itself. But, generally that treble is just a little bit, especially the upper bit, just too conservative. But on the other hand, On this set, a little less air is much better than a lot of fatigue, and this one isn't fatiguing at all for that same reason. But where's the magnetostat, right? So the magnetostats typically, especially that type of model, they tend to work out here in the very upper treble, and this one rolls it off pretty hardcore. So not exactly sure what the magnetostat's doing. Usually you can hear it poke itself out. Usually you'll hear some weird timbre things. You'll hear some, this weird wispiness on the cymbals, and you don't really get that on this one. So, I will leave it at where is the magnetostat, because I don't think it's doing a whole lot in this set, personally. Just my opinion. No facts to back that one up, but yeah, usually you tend to hear them. Like I said, KZZES is definitely one where it's in the same configuration, and you definitely hear some weirdness in the upper treble in this configuration. So again, stage, separation, layering, speed, all bump up with better sources. I'm a stage guy, kind of a separation guy, speed, all these things make this experience of listening to music much more enjoyable, much more of an experience, as opposed to just like straight up playback of instruments and vocals. So I very much get into the experience of big sound stages and how things are layered. And on this one, again, I will harp and say on dongles, it's a little more closed in. It's definitely not as deep at all. It's definitely kind of flat. It's wide enough, but it's just kind of flat. It's not quite the experience that I would want at $80, but give it a really nice source, and you definitely get all those things, and it definitely sounds quite good. But you just need a more powered source. So it will scale from this quite average, like I said, to beyond its price tag with better sources. And especially when you consider it for a fun set that's got a big bass and a big lower treble, to have a big stage with some nice depth to it. It's not something you find every day, and something I found unique about the MM2 is it retained really that big stage on a better source, with all that bass. For a fun set, that's actually a pretty good thing to do. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.